Hello, welcome to Zest Prime. As part of this video, we are going to see the major difference between iterative component and iterative bean. So as part of the previous videos, we have already seen the examples and how to use these things like iterative component and iterative bean. So in this video, we are going to summarize the basic difference between the iterative component and iterative bean, like when to use, what's the major difference, how the scanning will happen, and like that we can see around 10 major differences between these components. So mainly, like we discussed as part of the previous videos, iterative component and iterative beans are used to manage the beans. So they have different use cases, and how they are going to use it, what their use cases, we can see as part of the this video. So we can see the first difference, we can see the purpose. So the purpose of the iterative component we can use inside the Spring Boot, and this will happen automatically. We no need to do any specific scanning. So that's the main purpose. So whereas in case of bean, so you need to use the bean inside the configuration, and so this can be, it could be like it's external bean, and but it is you are trying to configure inside your Spring Boot application. So that's the main purpose. So iterative component, it's inside your Spring Boot application, and it will be does this scanning automatically, whereas in case of iterative bean, it could be either outside of the package or outside the application, and you have to manage the configuration, you have to manage the bean creation inside your Spring Boot application inside your iterative configuration. So that's the main purpose. So based on your use case, you can decide whether you go for iterative component or iterative bean. So that is one of the thing we can see the purpose. So the second thing is usage. So at the rate of component, basically we have seen in the past, we are applying at the rate of controller, repository, services by marking them. So typically, so that we are treating as a components, but it's a different kind of flavor, like a kind of service control repository. Whereas in case of bean, so we are applying mainly inside the at the rate of configuring a specific method. So that's the main use case. So it will be used, Catheter component will be used inside various flavors like service controller and repository, whereas in case of bean, it will be used inside the configuration only. So that's the usage. So the third one, we can see component scanning. So for iterative component, you can detect Spring Boot, it will detect automatically, so we need not to write uh, any additional component. Like we can use iterative component scan to detect or register annotation classes, but Spring Boot does not require any such kind of things. It will detect your components automatically and it will try to initialize the beans. But whereas in case of iterative bean, so you just define iterative bean, and so wherever it is required on top of the method, so then it will scan automatically and it will try to inject the objects. Let me show you the example what you have seen in the past, so that will give more sense. So first you'll see here, so this is the one of the example we have already seen. Inside your configuration class, you can define a method, and inside the method you can try to initialize the object manually, however it's possible, because we are thinking this is the external class, it's a non-Spring Boot class, so we are initializing the object over here. But it's going to be utilized, or when it is be initialized, so that is you have already defined the bean at the rate of the Spring Boot application initialization time, or if you declare as a lazy, then whenever it is going to use it, so that time it will be initialized. Similarly, if you come back to at the rate of component, so this will be initialized at the Spring Boot initialization. If you don't want, you can mark it as a at the rate of lazy. The scanning will happen automatically over here, so here it will happen based on the configuration. So that's the major differences. So now let me go back to the differences. So these are the three differences. Now there is some more differences like configuration classes. So another use case is like configuration classes. So, so these iterative components can be used mainly for the component scanning. We don't need any specific configuration over here. But whereas in case of bean, so we have to define the iterative configuration class, and inside the class we have to define the a method, and that method we have to treat as a bean. So that means it's not component not required any configuration, whereas in case of bean it is required a iterative configuration class. So that's one of the difference. So the next difference is customization and configuration. So in case of components, we don't have much option to customization. And why? Because it's most of the things are handling by a Spring Boot application. So whereas in case of Bean, so you have more flexibility because you are dealing with the object creation, and so that's where you can see more flexibility over here. So the another difference is Bean name. So that in case of component, the default name is with a class name. Example, say for instance, we have here my component is your class name at the rate of component, then your B name will become my component and the first char should be lowercase. So that's the way you can able to get the default name, but in case if you want it, you can use the value attribute and you can define your own name. So this is also we have seen uh, in the past. So in case of at the rate of bean, so you have to define the at the rate of value, so then only you will be getting the corresponding bean name. So that's the bean naming structure. And the next difference is dependency injection. So first we can see at the rate of components, it will be used various supports like a constructor injection, fields injection, method injection. It can be used variety or all possible types of injections it will support. But whereas in case of bean, it will support mainly in case of method injection or method parameter only. It will not support other things. So that's one of the major difference between at the rate of component and at the rate of bean. Now come back to the lazy initialization. At the rate of component or a Spring Boot, by default it will support the lazy initialization. So either you can use at the rate of lazy annotation or you can use at the rate of XML configuration, but by default it will support as a lazy eager initialization. And if you don't want eager, then you can go for explicit specify as a at the rate of lazy, then your component will be initialized whenever it is required. So similarly at the rate of bean also will be initialized eagerly as when your configuration class is trying to initialize. If in case if you don't want, you can explicitly you have to enable at the rate of lazy. So that also we have seen in the previous examples. Let me show you. So this is one of the example what you have seen in the past. So we have defined here lazy. In case if you are not defining the lazy, what will happen? So this component or a configuration will be initialized when Spring Boot application is starting up. Similarly, you can use the lazy for components, either configurations or methods. And you can use for controller also. Like I said, controller also is one flavor of components. So that's the reason you can able to control the bean initialization by using this annotation. This is one of the difference between or use case between the lazy initialization. And the last one is bean lifecycle methods. So Spring Boot will manage the coordinator component lifecycle methods, like when it will be created, when it will be initialized, and when it will be destroyed. So automatically. So we don't need to take care. So if you want to change it anything, then we have to use it explicitly. But all the bean management will be happening automatically done by Spring Boot container. So in case of bean, so here we have only method. So for that method, you can define the possible things before constructing the object at the rate of bean type and after constructing the object. and specific to that method. So these are the two things are possible: pre-construct and pre-destroy. So these are the two things you can apply in case of bean at method level, and you can write your own logic what you want to perform. I mean, before initializing the bean or after initializing the or destroying the bean. So these are the life cycles will be supported in case of component and at the rate of bean. I think that's all about this video. And if you like the video, you can subscribe to the channel for more subsequent updates. Thanks for your time.